Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Best Practices session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carrie Damon. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship Education here at MaRS, which includes some of the live series like the MaRS Best Practice series and Entrepreneurship 101, as well as our online education in the Entrepreneur's Toolkit on the marsdd.com website. I am very pleased to introduce our speakers here today. We have a panel, which is lovely, so we'll get a number of different perspectives. And they will be speaking in the order that I introduced them. So it's going to go from Arlene to Tim to Glenda. I'll just ask that if we have questions, that we hold them to the end. And we have a mic that this mic will put it in the back, and that helps for the video quality for people to actually hear what the questions are. So I'd like to introduce first Arlene Gould. Arlene is a design management consultant, a researcher, and an educator who has connected business leaders to strategic design for over 20 years. She is the strategic director of the Design Industry Advisory Committee, a non-for-profit think tank and cross-disciplinary design research group established by the City of Toronto. I think, Arlene, you'll probably talk a little bit about DIAC today. She also is very active in teaching to product design. She's the adjunct professor in the Faculty of Graduate Studies at York University, and she's also the coordinator of the Design Management Certificate program at Ryerson University. Our second speaker is Tim Poupore. I thought I'd get his name wrong. He is the chair of DIAC, the Design Industry Advisory Committee. He's also the director of standards at ACIDO. Sure. Probably got it wrong. For more than 3 decades, he has been at the forefront of user-centered design and has been instrumental in the commercialization of hundreds of products. He's an ardent supporter of design-centered policy initiatives at all levels of government, and he is a past president of the Association of Chartered Industrial Designers of Ontario. And our third speaker is Glenda Rissman, the principal of Q30 Design, Inc. She is the co-founder and principal of Q30 Design, Inc., which is a Toronto-based graphic design and communications consulting firm. Some of her clients have included Domtar Papers, Canada Post Corporation, Casey House, the Ontario Hospital Association, Health Achieve, Design Thinkers, and the Rotman School of Management. Her work has been recognized by the Smithsonian Institute, the American Institute of Graphic Arts, the Mead Annual Report Show, Applied Arts Magazine, and the Advertising and Design Club of Canada, as well as the New York Art Directors Club. So we have a really interesting, well-rounded panel with a variety of perspectives on product design, and we hope that you enjoy their presentations today.
Thanks so much. As Carrie mentioned, the Design Industry Advisory Committee is a think tank and cross-disciplinary research group. It was established in 2001 by the City of Toronto, and our board includes executive members of the Ontario Professional Design Associations representing industrial, graphic, interior and fashion design, architecture, and landscape architecture. So the 6 disciplines of design in Ontario. This event is one of a series of seminars we are delivering to clients of Toronto-based incubators as part of the DIAC Pop-Up Design Incubator Program, which is a new program we've developed, supported in part by the City of Toronto. In 2004, DIAC worked with Professor Merritt Gertler and Tara Vinodry at the University of Toronto to develop an economic profile of designers in Ontario. And we were able to demonstrate with this research that, in fact, the Greater Toronto Area is the 3rd largest center for design employment in North America after New York and Boston. So we have the 3rd largest number of designers in the workforce across those 6 disciplines of design that I mentioned. So we know that Ontario is, in fact, Canada's manufacturing hub, and we are also Canada's design hub. With, at the time we did the research, it was 40,000 designers. This number has now risen to 45,000 designers in the workforce. And the use of strategic design is a way we can fully leverage this asset base. Strategic design means turning the assets of the company to the needs of the market. Now, you might think that most companies already do this, but we believe that strategic design is, in fact, the missing link in the innovation agenda. Innovation plus strategic design equals success. That's the proposition we would like to share with you today, and I hope demonstrate how this proposition can actually work for you in your business. So how can you actually leverage strategic design? Well, in fact, in a number of different ways. Most importantly, design adds value to product and service development. We have some examples of this. Design creates unique and compelling products and services. On the top slide is a picture of the generic black garbage can, of course sold in places like Canadian Tire for years. On the bottom is a product that I'm sure you're also all familiar with, the Umbra Garbo. And the Garbo is not just a high design, stylish product. In fact, it's the signature product for a design-led company that is well on its way to becoming one of the dominant global houseware brands. So Umbra is actually able to compete in a very competitive category internationally. And they do that as a design-led company by being very smart about color management, about re-engineering products to take the cost out. They work with commodity resins like polypropylene, and using again their design brain, and their designers are located here in Scarborough, although they manufacture most of their products today in Shenzhen in China. So they have actually used strategic design to contribute to their international success. One of my favorite products that has been developed in Ontario in recent years that is a user-centered product, and not only does strategic design help to make products unique and compelling, but also user-orientated. So they help companies switch from a very technology-focused product development strategy to a user-orientated strategy. The Staxi is a lightweight transport chair that you probably have seen in hospitals. It's now being used in airports in Ontario, but also around the world. It was developed by Dr. Jeff Fernie when he led the Center for Studies in Aging at Sunnybrook Hospital with a team of industrial designers and engineers. It doesn't replace the wheelchair, but it's used to transport people with mobility issues around large spaces. It's very easy to use, to operate. The user actually slides into the chair from the side. It's theft-proof because it stacks like the supermarket trolley. And there are lots of other features about this particular product that are very user-centered and have contributed to the success of the spin-off company that manufactures this product in Ontario today. A few years ago, DIAC was involved in a study of design and advanced manufacturing. We looked at a number of companies in Ontario, including Xenon, Oakville-based Xenon, just as it had been at the time it was taken over by GE Water and Process Technology. And we were looking at the design-led aspects of their production and, in fact, their marketing strategy. We looked at the packaged water treatment plant known as the Z-Box. And this product was redesigned by a team of engineers working with local industrial designer Miles Keller. And this product, they actually managed to create design improvements that actually made the product faster to install and easier to use. And in fact, were able to reduce costs by almost half in this redesign of the product. And what the marketing manager said to me at the time we did this research was that this product looked great at the trade shows. And I said, does that really matter for a product that you sell only 15 of around the world? It's not a it's not a consumer product. He said, yes, absolutely. The look of the product does matter. Design adds value, so not only by simplifying and making products more cost-effective, but also more sustainable. A good example is the BioWall, a product developed by Alan Darlington when he was at the University of Guelph. This also is a highly visible green product in green buildings and LEED certified buildings today. You know, most green technologies for building are embedded products like geothermal and radiant heating. The biowall is very visible in the space, and it's become a kind of iconic image of what is a green building that's also a building that's very good for users and a healthy space to be in. So this technology cleans the air in commercial spaces. It's a very cost-effective proposition when you look at all the statistics and costs of sick building syndrome, and there's been a lot of research done on that, particularly in the US today. And we're seeing many installations of this iconic design. This particular biowall is at the Guelph Humber building. It's the University of Guelph building on the Humber College campus. Design also tells stories, and this is particularly an important advantage for technology-based companies as well as other companies in small business. Design tools can be used to visualize the potential of a technology in early stage development. We've been working with several companies over the last few years that have an emerging technology and would very much like to demonstrate the future applications before they've actually commercialized this technology. And design tools such as visualization and modeling and the work that can be done in a design charrette help these companies to fulfill that potential. Design helps to brand embedded technologies. Probably the Intel Inside campaign is the best example of that. And also to make an emotional connection with users. The images here are from a design charrette that DIAC organized in 2009. We brought a group of designers from all disciplines together to actually develop a more human-centered vision for Toronto's Grand Boulevard, University Avenue. And we invited some illustration students from Sheridan Institute to visualize our ideas as we were developing them on the day of the charrette. So we talked about what would happen if we turned the medium in the middle of University Avenue into a more people-centered space by flying a soft fabric covering over the space, and then the space could become usable instead of a desert the way it is now. And the student was able to visualize what would be the look and feel of that space so we could build on our ideas in the course of that day. Of course, design is inevitable. So most of you, if you're in a small company developing a new product or service, you are already using design whether or not you're working with a professional designer at this time. But the real question is, how are you using design, or how well are you using design, and are you actually reaping the benefits of the potential of strategic design? One of the design evaluation tools that I like very much was developed at the Danish Design Center in 2003. At that time, a study was done of companies of various sizes, from 10 to 20 people, and then all the way up to 100 plus in various industries. And this group in Denmark looked at the design activities in a company, the way they were using design, and they developed what's called the design ladder. So they actually developed a continuum of design maturity based on the way companies were using design at that time. So the bottom level on the ladder is in fact the category known as no design or non-design. So that means these companies, and there are lots of these companies in Ontario today, who are developing new products, and they are using design, but they may not be working with professional designers. Other professionals are involved in that development. And the next category was design as styling. So in fact, in that case, it could be professional designers or other professionals were involved in adding styling to the form of a product once it had already been fully developed. So in other words, late in the process. And the third level of the design ladder, that was the case where companies in fact were using design throughout the product development process. And the highest level was what this study characterized as design connected to strategy and innovation. So in those cases, the companies really were connecting the idea of strategic design to the way in which they were developing innovation and their whole business strategy. And in this study, the Danish Design Center looked at these companies over a period of time between 2003 and 2007. During that time, they had developed seminars and other support programs, so they were actually helping companies to understand the value of strategic design, and you can see that the numbers changed during that time. So the numbers of companies in the non-design category went down, as companies moved up the design ladder, the numbers moved higher. So I think the design ladder is a very useful way of looking at how, in fact, you can increase your use of strategic design and reap the beneficial results. So the question is, where are you today on the design ladder, and how can you move up the ladder using design at higher and higher levels of maturity to increase commercialization success? And one way you can do that is to actually consider a process called the integrated design process. A few years ago, we were looking at the product development process, and in fact noted that in many cases, including some cases here in Canada, the process is represented as a linear process. And design, if it's on the map, is actually shown as one step in the process. So in other words, products may be developed by engineers and other professionals, and then they would hand over to a designer who would do their work and hand back, and you'd end up with a finished product. But in fact, a much more useful way of looking at new product development in terms of innovation potential is in fact a cyclical model. So DIAC, working with the CEDO, the Association of Chartered Industrial Designers of Ontario, developed a representation of the cyclical model of steps in the product development process that actually applies to all of the disciplines. And the interesting thing about this model is it connects very well to the idea of the design ladder, in that the second step in the design ladder, when we're talking about just using design as styling, that would be involved in conceptualization and development only in those middle steps. And that's traditionally where we do get designers usually involved in product development. If we look at the process model, that would be integrating design into each of these steps, including everything from opportunity to the launch phase, because it's at the launch phase that you're already thinking of the next iteration. In fact, what you learn from this product development cycle enables you to improve on your product in the next cycle. We know that the market doesn't stand still, and your work in product development and improvements, of course, should also always be cyclical. So the model of the integrated design process is universally applicable to various product development challenges, to all of the design disciplines. It's cyclical and iterative, and it's also the process. In fact, this particular diagram comes from green building design, and when we talk about the integrated design process in green building, we're talking about involving all of the stakeholders in the process at every point in the development cycle. And that's the way to improve on success and do thinking around the really tricky problems, including those involved in how we develop smarter buildings that reduce environmental impacts and are better buildings for users to be in and work in. I wanted to tell you about one more program of the Design Industry Advisory Committee, and that is the Design Advisory Service, which is a program that we launched 2 years ago, and to actually introduce entrepreneurs, particularly technology-focused entrepreneurs, to the strategic design process. This is a small program that's being supported by IRAP. We were able to do 10 projects in the first year, and we are completing another 10 projects in the second year. It involves doing a design audit of the small company, so looking for where the strategic design opportunities may lie in a particular company and their product development process, connecting that company with an appropriate designer from any of the design disciplines for 1 week of strategic design work. That designer then delivers a report, and we are writing case studies on the outcomes, on the value of the work that's being done through the Design Advisory Service. The company in the picture is Nuco Plastics, a small manufacturer in the Chatham-Kent area that has been involved in it's a third-tier supplier to automotive companies. And this particular quite smart manufacturer was considering what else he could do in the downtime. He's an expert in injection molding plastics, and wondering beyond automotive, where are the other sectors where this company could use their manufacturing expertise. And through this process, he was able to come up with some other opportunities. I would like to hand over to my colleague Tim Poupore to talk about the industrial design.
Thanks, Arlene. I'm going to try and compress 30-odd years of experience into about 10 minutes. I'm wearing a couple of hats today, one of which is representing ACIDO, although the current president is sitting right here in the front row, so if you have any real questions, you can throw them at him later on. This is Jonathan Loudon. Just wave. There you go. ACIDO is the provincial arm of a national organization that was founded in 1948. The Ontario chapter received the charter in 1984 and was given a mandate to conduct 3 different levels of operation. The first one, the most important one, being accreditation. We work as a standards body trying to set standards of best practice in professional conduct. We work in the area of networking, trying to provide a community for like-minded practitioners. And we work in public relations, which is what's happening today to some degree, communicating with businesses, government, and the public to foster an appreciation for the value we can bring to daily life, helping to create a safer, healthier, and more prosperous Ontario. At least that's the plan. I want to use the integrated design process diagram to try and illustrate how industrial designers can help you at each stage of the process and to get the most out of your industrial design experience. I'm going to be using collages of images from a number of ACIDO accredited professionals at 3 firms in the GTA, one being Design Force, another one Spark Innovations, and the third one my company, Ove Industrial Design. This first section, opportunity, is where it starts, and I don't think that's going to come as much of a surprise. Whether it happens to you while you're in the shower or when you're walking down the street, what happens is it hits you that a visionary idea comes along that can literally change your life. If you connect with an industrial designer at that point in time, the designer can help you with issues of risk awareness, conducting SWOT analysis, determining the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your particular your plan, help you to understand the unmet needs that your target audience has, and to approach it with a vision that leads to a successful product development process for you. I'm having a little difficulty seeing my notes here. I don't know why that is. Oh, I've done that again. Anyway, the next section, strategy. Clearly you need a strategy if you're developing a new product opportunity. And here again, competent industrial designers well-versed in design research methods can be instrumental in digging into the needs and expectations of your target demographic, helping by asking primarily the question why. Why is it you want to do this? Why do you want to offer this new solution? How is it going to improve people's lives? And what are the challenges that you're going to face? So your designer can help you to challenge assumptions that you might be making about how this product might be, or this service that you're creating. Uncovering strategic insights into the drivers that lie behind purchase decisions, helping you to understand and consider how to best deploy scarce resources with a focus on reaching your business objectives. Now, I suspect most of you, when you see pictures like this, you think, aha, this is design. Well, I would like to make an argument that this is not design. This is the representation of design. Design is actually an intellectual process, I'm sure that's not a surprise either, of determining the features and attributes of a successful product or service. It happens in your head. There are manifestations of design in the form of these models and sketches and early prototypes and so on. These are intended as devices that can answer specific questions about the relationships between the products that you're creating and the people who are going to use them. They explore size, they explore shape, materials, processes, colors. If they're enclosing other devices, components or mechanisms, they can explore how that housing function works. We explore ergonomics and anthropometrics to make sure that things fit. And in every case, the tools that we use and the models and the prototypes that we create are intended to answer questions. What's going to motivate your customer base to buy your product over a competitor's product? And those are very fundamentally important questions that you need to consider. All of these devices can be used to evaluate the direction that you're taking and work towards a final solution that will, assuming you do it properly, will have some success in the field. So if that concept phase is where we explore what's desirable, the development phase is where we explore what's possible. And with the other phases in this diagram, you have to imagine a series of feedback loops, okay? So if you get to a particular point at a particular stage and something doesn't work, you may have heard the expression fail early, fail often. It's often valuable to know what doesn't work just as it is to know what does work. And so you find yourself working in a series of iterative loops, the cyclical design that Arlene mentioned earlier, and eventually you find yourself able to check off all the boxes, find out what is working best for your particular scenario, and fold that into the final design. And again, there are tools that we can use in order to help arrive at that determination. Models, prototypes, going through a series of testing iterations and determining how best to resolve some of the questions that design presents to you. And gradually you work through a process of refinement that gets you to a point where you can say, this is finally the exercise that we want to move forward into production. And that involves the stage of implementation. If you haven't worked with a designer and you haven't worked with people experienced in product development, this is where your decisions come back and bite you. The implementation phase is where you start to spend significant resources on tooling, for example, on manufacturing agreements, on a variety of different stages of getting your product into the market. And if you haven't considered a lot of the pitfalls that are out there, this is where you can start to fall into them. Clever design is evident at this stage in the form of part consolidation, for example, the specification of appropriate materials, an understanding of the kind of production plan that you might have for perhaps an early stage product, a Mark I iteration of your design that may require only low volume manufacturing. If your plan is to use the resources from the sale of that Mark I version to create a more pervasive Mark II version, it would be really nice if Mark I was a success in the field. So coordinating production, determining the specifications for manufacturing, these are all areas that an industrial designer can help you with, and we don't do it alone. One of the things to keep in mind is that industrial design is not a solo activity. We work with a lot of different professionals. I can't think of a single project I've worked on in 30 plus years that hasn't involved engineering on some scale, manufacturing specialists, materials specialists, processing specialists. In a perfect world, this team comes together in the early stages so that all of their skill sets can be brought to bear on some of the questions that you're going to face. And if it works properly, then the result is a better product and a more successful business solution for you. Now, if there's any place in this particular loop where the designer typically gets left out, it's here, because after all, his work is done. At least that's sometimes the client's perspective. In fact, that's not the case. Just as in all of the other sections of this process, keeping a designer involved can reap significant benefits. Not just in helping to communicate the product's tangible and intangible benefits through promotional activities or packaging or target marketing, but also having designers present to see how consumers respond to your product in that first initial iteration. Taking notes, understanding pain points or PowerPoints within a particular design, and folding all of that information, collecting all of that data, and using it to develop design parameters for the next iteration of the product. Is critically important in the cyclical design phase, because of course you're not just simply going to do this once. If you're successful, you're going to do it over and over again. And of course that brings us back to the opportunity, which is the phase at which this knowledge that you've gathered in that launch phase can be used to start the process all over again. So the good news is that design never sleeps. Somebody's always doing it. The only thing that really matters is whether your competitors are doing it better than you are. Whether they're more consistent or more thorough than your approach, that can have a significant impact on your success in the market. Coming back to ACIDO, I'd like to encourage you to look for the call sign ACIDO whenever you're investigating a practitioner. This is the closest thing you're going to find to a P-Eng in our world, and it implies that the person who shows these letters has not only completed design education at an accredited school, but they've also completed a minimum of 5 years of practical professional expertise, and they've submitted a portfolio of their work to a jury of their peers. As always, when you're looking to partner with somebody, I encourage you to use the Holy Trinity, mastery, chemistry, and delivery, to determine who you want to work with. And I thank you for your attention. I'm going to hand over to Glenda now.
Can you slide?
I can slide that.
Okay, thank you.
So I can do
So what Tim was just talking about with ACIDO, our equivalent in the graphic design world is the RGD. And so me being the last speaker, I'm going to plow through this really, really quickly. But RGD Ontario is the organization that you would go to find qualified professionals that have passed the various tests and can deliver the quality that you're looking for. They were also instrumental in accrediting our profession, which until recently had not been an accredited profession. So my presentation is going to differ a little bit from what Arlene and Tim, for obviously the medium is going to change because we're going to be talking about graphic design, but I'm going to ask that you try to put your imaginary hat on and try and envision your product or service in the graphic design realm. What I wanted to do is just show you 3 case studies of clients that I've worked with for a number of years, and why I picked these projects is because we were involved very, very early on at the opportunity phase and went all the way to launch with these projects. And I think the more collaborative you are with your designers, the better the outcome, hopefully the greater the success. I too have been a graphic designer for a number of decades, which I won't disclose, unlike Tim. And I had to I personally had to move up that design ladder from being an aesthetic designer to a more strategic designer. And so all the work that I want to do now are with clients that understand that understand the importance of that. And the first project that I'm going to show you is a project that we did a couple of years ago for Rotman, the Rotman School of Management. They were trying to promote, it wasn't a new program, but it was called the Omnium Global Executive MBA Program. And so it falls under their Executive MBA program, which is a sub-brand of the School of Management. So you could say it's 3 tiers below. It started, they came to us and wanted us to develop some marketing communications materials for them. And why do I say finding a needle in a haystack? Because their audience are worldwide professionals from, I would say, age 35 to 50, who have realized all their goals in business and have been asked through their companies to practice globally and somehow have not succeeded. So very, very, very niche audience. The mandate was to communicate that Omnium was a truly global executive MBA program, in that the program spans over a year and a half, and the students work in cities of 5 emerging countries, and they can keep their jobs and go on these go to these cities to participate in these courses. So the other mandate was obviously to increase registration, and then the third was to how do we reach this global audience. And so what we did is we interviewed previous students, so alumni, potential students, students that didn't take this course, professors. We wanted to find out, okay, if we have to communicate that this is a different program, what is that difference in this very crowded market, and how do we tell it? And so we came up with this idea of how wide is your world. In other words, if you're going to participate in this program, your knowledge of the world, and even sort of from a more soft standpoint, how the rest of the world does business. And I'll explain that a little bit more as I go on. So it speaks to the student's need of, they're at a point in their career, they've had the experience of not succeeding, and where do they go from here? And what we found when we interviewed the students, aside from learning how to do business in other countries, so for example, in Brazil, many decisions are made on the beach. And if which sounds completely crazy to North Americans, but there's a certain dance that you have to do in each of these countries, and to just have your company send you there and expect you to understand this in a very short period of time is very difficult. And so in trying to tell that story, what we did is we hired 5 illustrators from 5 of the emerging market countries. So we tried to find illustrators from each of these countries to illustrate these concepts. So this one is from Switzerland, and in Switzerland, a company will be a leader in developing a surgical knife. And in Switzerland, one product can sustain a company. And so it's just, we tried to just illustrate these in very compelling and almost entertaining ways. And the schedule is quite complex for this program, so we had to try to, again, simplify complexity, because it's a crowded market again, and you want to get people's attention really, really quickly. And then we designed a website for them, and the homepage had an animation, and we wanted to highlight that #1 benefit right off the bat. So we showed, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, it's a little low in tone, but it's a map, and then the animation ends on the cities, and then it comes back to reinforcing that message of the brochure of how wide is your world. So it was very successful in that what we knew was that our audience found out about this program firstly on the web, and so it was very, very important for us to get that benefit out very, very quickly when someone went to the website. And then the next step was for them to call someone at U of T, and then they were sent a package with the brochure. So registration increased, and it's just an ongoing battle to continually get bums in those seats. That's exactly what they said to us when they gave us this project: get bums in our seats. Okay, so now now for something completely different, a butcher, a Toronto brand. Some of you may know about them. They're called Cumbres, and I've called this slide "Getting the Story Straight" because Cumbres originally they came to us to design a brochure, an in-store brochure for them, and what we found out is that when we went into the store, we heard customers asking the staff questions, and the staff were not answering the questions consistently, because the whole story of food now has become very, very complicated. Are they organic? Are they naturally raised? What are the differences? What does all this mean? And so when we met with them and laid out the creative brief, the mandate was to articulate their philosophy and make sure that the story was being told consistently. And we added the point of over-delivering, because the meat is actually very expensive. And so if someone is going to buy meat from them, we felt they have to get more than what they expect. And so we developed a program so that they would see this, and I'll take you through this. So this just points to us, it started with a strategic person and then a writer molding the story for them, and the story appears in their stores and in their brochures, and we developed a frequently asked questions list for all their staff, and we trained their staff on how to answer these questions. And we provided the client with templates and just tools that they could use to elevate their brand without using us. So when we go away, when our engagement is over, if it's not an ongoing and continual engagement, we want to make sure that the work that we've done is being maintained by them properly. So this was a whole labeling system that we implemented for them. And you can see the quality of the product and how different all these labels are in different products. And then most recently we launched a website, probably the third iteration of their website in December. And the client came to me and said, you know what, I want to be able to describe our philosophy, but unlike what we've done in the past, I want to describe it in as few words as possible because I don't think anybody goes to a website and wants to read a lot about meat. So we simplified the philosophy down to 3 words: farm, store, table. And this butcher is very earnest in traditional farming, not giving the animals antibiotics, so it's not organic, but it's traditionally farmed. He gets his products from very, very small farms, and then he wants that in-store experience to be fantastic and different. And then the ultimate is the meat being served on your table and everybody really enjoying it. So how do you communicate this without using words, very simply on a website? And so what we did is we shot 3 videos, which you're not able to see here. We shot 3 videos of the farm, the table, and the store. So when you go to his website and you click on farm, these are real sheep in the farm. The farmer actually walks into the shot, and then you have your choice to go to 3 different kind of black boxes. And essentially this website is the culmination of all the programs that we have done for Cumbres over the years. So it's a blog where he posts blogs once a week. We did a bag stuffer campaign where when people bought product in their bag were cooking instructions or recipes on how to cook the meat. So that's the over-delivering component. And then the store, you just see the meat and the door open. So it's all live animation, and it gives you a chance to. And then the culmination is the end, the table. People are sitting there, someone's carving a roast beef, and you hear happy people, and they're loving the food. And then finally, some recipes that you can click to. But it's your choice. It was all about getting that message out really, really quickly, and then your choice as to where you would want to go and see more, and locations. And how am I for time? I'll be okay, I'm going to rush through this one. My last case study, which was a creation of a new identity for the independent electricity system operators. They are the people that operate the whole electricity wholesale market based on the supply and demand of Ontario. So they were very used to dealing with the wholesale market. With deregulation, all of a sudden the general public were coming to them and didn't understand how the electricity sector worked. So we created an identity, we created the tagline, and we created a look and feel, what we call a look and feel for all of their materials. So if you were to put your hand over that ISO logo, you would know that this was an ISO product. So and all the language around it. And like Tim said, we do not work in isolation. We work with strategists, with brand strategists, with writers, printers, it's a whole group of people to get these projects produced. And then a website. And then this really cool little interactive smart lane, it's called 10 Smart Meter Lane, that describes the very complex time of use concept. So if you, it's a little house that is animated, and if you click on, for example, the washing machine, and you put the time in that you use your washing machine, in real time it will actually figure out your costs and show you, if you use it at different times, what the implications are. It's seasonal, so it's the illustration changes for 4 seasons. It changes for night and day. This was a phenomenally successful project for ISO. And I'm going to pass it back to Arlene. So, in summary, really, I think all of this ties up in that. How do you design something that communicates your idea, potentially your complex idea, in a graphic way, very simply?
Thank you, Glenda. So I would like to just sum up the 5 steps we think that would get you started on using a strategic design process that we've all been talking about in this presentation. The first step is connecting to the right designers. We talked about the Design Industry Advisory Committee, CEDO, and RGD Ontario. So those are all good resources to connect to both industrial designers and registered accredited graphic designers. DIAC is also the source for connecting to the other professions: interior design, industrial, graphic design, fashion design, architecture, and landscape architecture, depending on the nature of your new product or service development. The second step, to transfer from a technology focus to a user-oriented approach to new product and service development. This is a way to increase market success because you will be thinking more deeply about the needs of the users. You might think you already do that, but designers have particular skills to enable you to look at user needs, anticipate future needs, and make what might be subtle adaptation to your product or service to increase market success. The third step, use design to add value. We talked about the various ways that designers can help you add value, connecting, developing unique and compelling products, taking cost out of production, increasing user focus of the products, increasing the sustainability function of new products as well. Number 4, adapt the integrated design process. So integrating design into not just a one-step design, but into every step in the new product and service development, particularly at the very early steps, the origin of the innovation. And finally, repeat. We would like to encourage you to invest in the virtuous cycle of design. That's building deeper relationships with designers so you can constantly evolve and improve your products in the marketplace to sustain competitive advantage. So, innovation plus strategic design, we hope, can truly lead to your success in new product and service development. And we'd like to leave you with the contact information to DIAC, ACEDO, and RGD Ontario. And we'd be happy to take some questions.
This is a question directed at Arlene. I think the answer lies in terms of the 5 steps, probably on the focus on user-centered design, but I'm interested in how DIAC may contribute in any way to distribution, the whole notion of distribution, and whether in designing a product, there may be slightly different design considerations depending on the distribution, and often, those market channels may not be, where, certainly in terms of sustainability, may not be able to accommodate or ready for changes in product design.
So are you referring to distributing the product internationally to other countries or other cultures?
It could be internationally, it could be locally, it could be sort of mass market versus, mom and pop shops, or, it could be, there's any range of distribution channels. I'm not focusing on a specific one, but I'm just really interested in resources around distribution.
So I think you're right that this connects very closely to user-centered design and actually adapting the features and benefits of individual products to specific market needs. So you can have a core product and working again in the integrated design process, be able to adapt that product for uses in other markets or for specific markets locally without adding too much cost.
Right.
So again, we are a research organization, and we work at connecting small business and organizations to the design disciplines and designers to help them develop products that have greater chances of market success. But we don't actually go into the distribution channels, but we would say that companies are better prepared to succeed in those markets if they've thought early on about the needs various distribution channels.
Thank you.
Can I just add a couple of things? You've touched on something that is, it's really a bit of a moving target, and for many people a bit of a minefield. We're in a world where products can be manufactured by the millions, and other products can be manufactured for a market of one, particularly in the case of medical instruments, products with a high degree of intellectual content, but not a big market in terms of volumes. And so the question of distribution, the question of finding those products a home in their respective markets is itself a design challenge. And we've seen a lot of growth in social media and various other outlets that can help you. Viral marketing, for example, there are ways that you can get your messages out there and attract the markets that you're looking for. It is a challenge, and it is something that needs to be factored into the design of your product.
If I could just add one thing, not this coming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, we actually have a lecture on distribution in our Entrepreneurship 101 lecture, so that might be helpful. You could take a question there.
So that question was a plant then, was it?
No, yeah, it was a perfect plant. Anybody else have any questions?
I heard that injection molding process, and how can I apply, what is the procedure for injection molding?
Oh, well, I guess it depends on exactly what you're looking for, but it is a technology that's pervasive. Many products use injection molding of a variety of different kinds of materials. You need to speak to a designer who has perhaps experience with injection molding and can build in the kinds of technical details, draft angles, flow control, various other aspects that need to be anticipated in injection molded products. It's not a new technology, so there's lots of good information, lots of good expertise out there. Depending on what it is that you're trying to manufacture, there are steps that you can take to optimize the design for a given process, and a qualified practitioner should be able to help you with that.
Looking at your design process, it seems you start with opportunity and you end with launch, but having launched products before, a lot of the work actually goes post-launch through to conceptualization for opportunity. Yeah. But I don't know, if looking at things like software development life cycles, there's a lot of work that goes in there, and it just seems the word launch it relates, at least from my level, as a very specific activity to get your product out to market, right? Have you considered adding in a step in there called post-launch, which is about design review, which is about performers in the market, which is about competitive research, find out what your competitors are doing based on the work you've done?
I think that's a really good comment and would be very helpful, actually. So, in other words, between launch and your next opportunity, there's a lot of work that would actually merit a stage with a separate name. I think that's very useful, and we could indicate that on the diagram. You're quite right. The trick is always to get opportunities where designers are paid to do that kind of work. That's been a fight, and designers so far are sometimes quite happy to get involved without being paid, because they know that that part is so important. I'm talking more about industrial design, but.
Well, I'm thinking, would that be a business opportunity then? Mm-hmm. To actually open up a business which focused on the review of design processes?
Well, certainly design research is a huge and burgeoning field. It's something that a lot of design disciplines have been looking at very, very carefully for the better part of 10 or 15 years. It's really come into focus. It's a critically important aspect of the process. I don't know if it merits its own little milestone there, but something to think about. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sometimes in our proposals also we'll add in between each step the word validation, because really as you jump from step to step, you want to make sure that you're still on track, what's happening. So validation is also a really important word in there.
Yeah, and just a question for Tom that's sort of related to that. In terms of looking for opportunities, do you feel that when you're looking for an industrial designer, the trend towards having them on site at where the customers or where the end users are going to use it and studying their workflow before you come up with a design and seeing how you're going to solve pain points, is that a really important area to invest up front rather than saying that's not, you know, we know our market, right? And that's usually a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I find usually if a client comes to me with a brief that has a well-defined starting point or has a set of design parameters that are already in place, the first thing I like to do is challenge them, because you can't help but make assumptions about a particular market. I mean, the old adage of being too close to the forest to see the trees is probably apropos. But yes, putting designers in at the early stage, getting them into the context of the problem so they can look at how people are responding, see possible avenues to resolution, critically important. You'll really get the best out of a designer if you can start them right at the very beginning and have them involved throughout. Absolutely, yeah.
As you design creative and innovative new products or new logos or new marketing collateral, they're going to get ripped off. And you know, a big issue is copying these creative designs. Is there anything happening in the design community to try and build in ways of either preventing or constraining people who would copy or exploit creative designs?
I showed the Umbra Garbo, and in fact, Umbra's been very careful at actually using design IP. So they have patented in that Kerr machine design, they've patented 3 signature curves on that product. So a competitor could copy 1 or 2 of the curves, but the integrity of the Garbo involves all of the 3 curves on the handles, on the top, on the body of that particular product. That's a very clever way. You know, we all talk about design, about patents as a form of protection, but the idea of using design IP is a much smarter way over time. I would also say that in developing relationships with designers, that's the way you continuously stay ahead of the competition, because of course you can always be copied, but design touches everything. The best example being Apple. If you truly have design embedded into everything you do, that is what is difficult to copy, not a particular product that you put on the market. It's your total culture.
I think what Arlene's described is one of 2 methods of protecting your place in the market. Certainly going after IP and locking up ownership of a detail or a series of details is one way of doing it. It can be very expensive, and it can fail. I'm thinking of a situation with a client a couple of years ago who decided not to go ahead and pursue patent registration on their product because the cost of protecting it in a given market was excessive. They would have had to put together a significant amount of money to fight off anybody else, and they chose a different route. They chose to try to keep this design and development cycle going and to try and remain ahead of the competition through innovation, and it's been very successful for them. So you have both of those approaches.
Are there any other questions? I feel like Oprah running around with the mic. It's really weird.
Do we get gifts?
Have your seats.
Question for Tim. It's a 2-part question. If you're someone who has an idea, but you've never engaged with an industrial designer before, so you don't really know much about the field, what are your suggestions for how you evaluate an industrial designer? What should you be looking for going into it? And the second part of that is, what do you need to bring to the table? Should you be bringing in sketches, like models you made yourself to kind of help convey the idea, or just kind of the idea and knock it out with them?
The adage I like to use, as I mentioned at the end of my section, was mastery, chemistry, and delivery, and that's not something I own or developed. It's just something that's been out there for a while. Mastery talks about finding somebody who is comfortable in their own métier, finding somebody who is an expert in their field. You can find that if you understand what it takes to be an expert in the field. That's obviously a big advantage, but if you don't, you need to look elsewhere. You need to look at reputation, you need to look at experience, you need to talk to the person, you need to sit down and discuss your problems with them and see how they respond. And that will not only give you the opportunity to probe specific kinds of expertise that may be relevant to your product development cycle, but to also look at the second aspect, which is chemistry, which is an equally important aspect. If you can work with someone, if you can talk with them and you can explain your problems to them and they can explain solutions or the steps in a process back to you, that's a good sign. So following both of those will help. Delivery, of course, is, again, a little bit harder to quantify, but if somebody's been around for a number of years and they've been doing what you're looking for that period of time, and they've been doing it successfully, they have a good reputation in the field, those are good markers.
If you're looking to work with an industrial designer, is it standard to ask them for references? Somebody you can follow up with?
Oh, sure, yeah. They'll give you their best ones, of course. I mean, you have to be aware of that. Nobody's going to send you to somebody that they didn't get along with, but it's also worthwhile to appreciate that people sometimes don't get along, and there are projects out there in everyone's portfolio that didn't go as well as they might have hoped. That's fairly normal. As to what you should bring, an open mind is good. An open checkbook is good. Both of those help.
Any other questions up here?
I have a question about how you define when design is a standalone discipline and when it's part of something larger. And is it Glenda? Mm-hmm. I thought in particular in some of your examples, a lot of what you were doing and the recommendations that you made involved other areas like branding, which is change management, taglines, which are kind of linguistic as opposed to visual, although there's an overlap. So how would a potential client distinguish between those? Like supposing the butchery had said, well, we could go to a brand strategy shop, an advertising agency, or a specialist in graphic design. What criteria do you use to?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the butcher, I don't even think he was 100% clear. I mean, he knew that we did graphic design. I don't think he knew when we started working with him that we would bring in a writer and a strategist to help him out, to help him form his message. I think essentially, and I don't know if I'm answering your question, but every client has a problem, and we have to put together a team so that we can solve that problem. And we might have all of those people in-house, or we may not. And so, part of our skill set too is finding partners that are simpatico with what we do, and that, when we meet the client, will fit with the client. And sometimes, in some cases, we won't just recommend one person. If it's a writer, we might recommend 4 and let the client meet that writer and make sure that they have a good chemistry with them, because if we're going to recommend someone, it ultimately will fall back on us whether that worked or not. So your question, I guess what you're asking, what is pure design, and when does it almost always moves out of just solely design, because in actuality you're communicating with words and with graphics and all different things. And so the work that we like to do is when all of those things work together really well to solve the client's problem. So it's never really quite just design. And when it is, I would say the results aren't as powerful and as strong if it's just the aesthetic.
I'll just add something. It's a really good question. I think when we did our research on the design disciplines, we were able to demonstrate that half the designers in Ontario are in fact graphic designers. And I think that graphic design is the least understood and probably the most under-leveraged of the discipline, in that small businesses will set aside money for advertising. They know that they need to invest in that. But the idea of going to a graphic designer to help them communicate, in fact, clarify their key messages, is something that really is not done often enough. And there's great opportunity there to explore. As Glenda said, the graphic designer will work with other people, but this really is a chance for you to help clarify, again, what you do, what you stand for, and to get your messages across to the marketplace by tapping into this extraordinary resource that we have here in Ontario.
I mean, the interesting thing, I've been trying to get a story published on this butcher, and he gets a ton of PR, but specifically I'm trying to get a story published on why would this person that owns 3 butcher shops, he bought the first shop, and 1 year later bought the farm that was supplying, and this was all under the age of 30. He now owns several farms and 3 shops, and he's always calling me with ideas. Why would someone who is doing incredibly well constantly be putting money back into branding and design and web design? He wants to stay on top of his game. He understands that design really matters to the success of his business. Part of the reason why we changed the website is because all of his competition was copying him. And we had to do something radically different and take it in a very different direction because all of a sudden everybody was nipping at his heels. That didn't bother him. It just they weren't doing it as well. So it's a fantastic success story, and it really amazes me that he continually throws money into this business and into design and never ever stops. For a small business owner, that's really quite something.
For the IESO, do they have an advertising agency?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I don't think they do. We were their agency of record, I think, for 7 or 8 years. Yeah. And I don't think they do a lot of advertising. I could be wrong.
If I can just add one quick comment, I think what it boils down to on a certain level is, are you using this practitioner as a strategic partner or as a tactician? And there's a fundamental difference between the two. If you think you have it all sussed out and all you need is somebody to draw it up for you, that's a tactical approach, and you're not going to get the benefit, the real benefit that's inherent in the relationship that's being offered to you. If you can consider, well, the story that I often tell is the difference between the bookkeeper and the CFO in a corporation. Somebody, and not that there's anything wrong with either of those positions, but there's a particular tactical requirement for somebody who can write the checks and do the payroll and so on. But that's not the person you're going to go to for strategic advice about how to get your company to the next level. Design often, and many of our disciplines complain about this, they're treated as tacticians, called in after all of the key decisions have been made, and it's very, very difficult to change often at that point. If you can deal with a designer earlier on and you can get them in as a strategic partner, they can advise you in very different and more meaningful ways, and the results can be quite different.
Hi, you mentioned something about IRAP.
Yes.
What is that?
IRAP is the Industrial Research Assistance Program run by the National Research Council.
And you mentioned something about 1 week of advisory services?
The Design Advisory Service is a program that we're running. I'd be happy to give you some more information afterwards. It's a very limited program, as I mentioned, but it's being supported by IRAP. It does provide an introduction to strategic design.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I would like to thank our panelists, Arlene, Tim, and Glenda, for your unique perspectives. I think probably the thought I'd like to leave everybody with, as I work with graphic designers a lot on marketing materials, and it's very true that when you have them as a partner, and in terms of shaping your strategy and thinking ahead and constantly evaluating what you're doing, rather than just a tactician where you tell them what you need delivered on Friday. So I think that's really, really valuable into the product design area as well. Thanks very much for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good question.